And this is what I'm talking about when you get these clowns who jump up in the pulpit and start reading a bunch of stuff that's been manipulated and taken and twisted. There's nowhere in here that they're talking about police. They're not talking about law enforcement. They're not talking about nothing that this clown was talking about. And this is why I say these people are not preachers. And they mishandling the scripture and manipulating it to try to get across a corny little Bible moment. This is speaking specifically. Your soul has nothing to do with being stopped by the law. When it's talking about your soul, it's talking about being saved. It's talking about being subject to the powers that God put in place to govern the church. This is what Paul's letters were about. It was never about the laws or the authority that was ordained by Caesar or none of that. So let me just put that out there. I apologize for interrupting.
Creating the Christian ethic, watch, of being submissive to governmental authority. Watch. That what we owe the government, watch, is taxes and compliance with laws and following ordinances like traffic laws, like not parking in a handicap if you're not handicapped. Like not cheating on your taxes, not bending documents to get more money in your Pell Grant. This is, watch this. This is Jesus teaching all of us who are followers, watch. I want y'all to be, watch this word, model citizens. I want you to be the type of citizens under any government that you obey the government to such a degree that when people see you, they say something is different about that person. Man, the laws are tough, but they obey. The laws are difficult, but they obey. The law was creating the ethic, watch, of being submitted to authority. He was teaching us, watch, not to be rebellious towards authority, but to give Caesar what you owe him. To not be rebellious towards authority. That we have to learn to be model citizens that follow ordinances. Like I remember when I was 15 and I was walking down the avenue, Hollis. I'm walking down Hollis in Queens. And I remember an Italian officer, man, he drove by me in his car. He looked me in the eye and I looked him in the eye. We made eye contact and I kept walking. He came around the block, jumped out the car, grabbed me by my neck, smashed me up against a brick wall, and he put his Glock to the back of my head. Watch. And then he said to me, watch, say something. No phones. No iPhones, no cameras, no recording. And his Glock is pressed up against my head. Say something. Watch. Now in that moment, I hear the voice of my mother all the time harassing me. Oh, son. She's Trinidadian. Oh, son. Obey the Holy Spirit. Oh, son. Obey God. Oh, son. Obey authority. Oh, son. Obey the cops. Oh, son. Stop getting in trouble with the police. Oh, son. Obey your elders. Obey your elders. Obey authority. My mother and father constantly trying to teach me to obey authority. And in that moment, I hear her voice. And in that moment, I got to decide which one will be stronger, my ego or my submission. Right? I could flex in that moment and not obey the authority because my ego will be stronger than my logic, or I can submit and walk away with my life. And if I don't submit in that moment, man, I'm hurled into eternity by a cop's bullet. And I know there's bad cops out there. We know that. We know there's cops who's evil. Man, there's evil people in every industry preaching all that stuff. But man, not every killing of a black man was because of a bad cop. Some of that is because we have not taught our children to be, watch, obedient to authority. That some of the stuff that we bring upon ourselves when we provoke authority. And what the Lord is teaching us in this moment is to be model citizens that obeyed the laws of the land even when they hurt. Listen, after Jesus is resurrected, we see the evidence of this in the teachings of his followers. Romans chapter 13 and verse 1, the Apostle Paul writes to a church he did not found. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities. Listen, be a model citizen. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed. And those who resist will incur what? Judgment.
The scripture says obey magistrates. So there's not an argument to be made if we're talking from a biblical perspective. There's no argument to be made. That's the end of that because God said it. So I'm conflicted internally because the environment I come from, you know, they the ops, you know what I'm saying? But as I became a grown man and understand the scripture and understand what it is I believe and follow, what this guy is saying is he's not wrong. And that's just keeping it a bean. If you're talking from a scriptural biblical perspective, he's not wrong. Do these people abuse their authority? Do they do things that are unwarranted? Do they run down on marginalized communities and take advantage of their badge and their gun? 1,000,000%. But the scripture speaks clear. And despite my personal feelings about it, which are irrelevant when you're talking about God, I have to stick with what the scripture says. Now, the only part I disagree with is the part where I think his interpretation of the scriptures, because the guy we just watched is not a real preacher, by the way. Let's get that straight. If we talking about a scripture, this guy is not a real preacher. We ain't even gonna go down that path. But his interpretation is wrong when you're talking about these people being instituted by God. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? There are because the scripture says in another portion that there are principalities that we struggle against in high places. So it's a similar governing situation that we struggle against as well. And we know they take advantage of us. So I don't want to dwell on it too long. I have my personal feelings about it because I'm not the biggest fan of law enforcement, but what the scripture says is correct. And I can't let my personal feelings make me argue what God says. So I'm gonna just leave it at that.
I hate when people get up there and be polarizing regarding things that us in urban communities have dealt with, strife, crooked cops, and so on and so forth. The majority aren't. But I don't like when people play with those things. Obey, yes, you should. Every time I got rousted by a cop, I was obeying. They still made the most of it. I can only speak about my anecdotal experience. Officers were originally overseers over the plantations. Then it went down the line to who they are now. There's too many cases. Now it's more publicized as for those people that overstep their bounds, which make it look on those officers that go to do good within the community and be just. I don't like when people do that, such as him, because it's actually divide and conquer. Now you're dismissing the pain of those who are downtrodden for just being a certain skin color, where I know it well. I know of crooked cops. Said knows of gangs of cops that the DOJ had to step in and shake it up. There's many different things, but obey, yeah, you should. Ask Freddie Gray, Ahmaud Arbery. Ask the other couples that, escapes my mind right now, how they think. There should be more training so that we could obey properly. When they said, oh, you got a gun and, I got a candy bar, I did obey you, but you shot me. It can go both ways. And that's no disrespect, because I do have law enforcement in my family. But I also know crooked cops that used to beat the shit out of me. So obey to the best of your ability with a question mark. I land there.
Well, as the op on the live, I definitely have mixed feelings. And it's funny, JR, that you're talking about this, because I was having a live about case law earlier. I don't know if you came on in my live when I was breaking down laws and search and seizures and things that law enforcement we should or should not be doing. Should we obey? Yeah, we should obey laws that are just. But if a police officer is being corrupt and acting maliciously, then I would have an issue with it too. I gave an example of myself being, if I was stopped by an officer and I thought it was some BS, would I get up out of the car and do those type of things that the officer may command me to do if I knew the officer was in the wrong? I don't know. So I think it's going to be a case by case for each person. We also have to remember and when I say we, because I represent obviously someone, as Kenny knows, I was an officer for many years. I went, and got a law degree for it. And now, I do a lot of mentoring and that type of stuff. I train police officers and stuff now. So I get to see it from a perspective that you gentlemen don't get to see it from, because I've been on the other side of having to fight and apprehend people as well. So it depends. That's the only thing I can say. It depends. I can understand somebody not wanting to go along with what an officer said if the officer was just like how some of us just mess with people and stop people over bullshit and stuff like that. So
Well, first and foremost, I would like to point out there's a difference between obeying the law and admitting yourself to be oppressed. So for me, self-preservation is the first law of humanity. Like, we're here to survive. We're here to do what we have to do. Now, going to what the preacher was talking about, if a police officer had a gun to my head, or anybody, whoever it may be, I'm going to do whatever I can do, even if it's just shutting up and not, reacting or whatever, in order to survive. That's period, point blank. But will I be upset? Yes. Will I be like, this is unfair? Yes. Will I try to do something after the fact? Yes. Report to the watch commander or whatever it may be. But I do believe that, wherever you at, you should respect and obey the laws, because the laws are collectively for everybody to exist in society, and I'm there, and I love it, even though I got people that recently got DUIs and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I mean, you may think bad of the cop, but at the end of the day, you could have killed yourself and somebody else. So the laws are in place for a reason. Hopefully the laws are just, and if it's not, try to figure out a way for you to, integrate and change the laws for the betterment of society, or become a politician or whatever it may be. You know what I mean? But me traveling around the world, going to different countries, certain things you can and can't do no matter where you at. And I'm not going to say, oh, I'm an American, I could go to China and, do whatever it is because I'm American. No, like, you will go to jail, and nobody should want to go to jail at all. So, it's even me growing up in LA, like, if a police try to harass me, I mean, back then I was tripping. I got in the back of police cars at least once a year. Never been to jail though. Never been to jail, but I would be talking shit, like going crazy, like, fuck that, being an aggressive young man. But now, I embrace them with emotional intelligence, so I won't get caught up, so they won't put me in the back of the car. I'll be like, hey, officer, how you doing today? Because they are human beings at the end of the day too. So I'm not looking at you as authority. I'm looking at you as an equal, and I'm going to treat you as such. And hopefully you treat me as the same thing. Like, one time I got pulled over and me and a police officer were joking with each other, So I feel like, and that's also one thing that, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan teaches, is that you have to know the place you at, the type of person that you're dealing with. And at the end of the day, you here to, survive and get over that hump. So I hope that Black people, out there, just know that sometimes you can be oppressed. Sometimes you are messing up and you need to be reprimanded. But at the end of the day, you need to survive. And those people, some of them have a license to kill. Thank God we got, the cams now, but it's totally different than when Kenny P and, other people were experiencing. Now we got cams, so we're pretty much in a better situation. But like, you still don't know what anybody could do when they're angry and they're mentally unstable and they have a gun.
All right, let's go to Hank
Hey,
now.
Lapeef, before you move on, can I just interject something real briefly? 30 seconds. Now, this is how the scripture really reads. Let every soul be subject unto higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. And this is what I'm talking about when you get these clowns who jump up in a pulpit and start reading a bunch of stuff that's been manipulated and taken and twisted. There's nowhere in here that they're talking about police, and not talking about law enforcement, and not talking about nothing that this clown was talking about. And this is why I say these people are not preachers, and they mishandling the scripture and manipulating it to try to get across a corny little viral moment. This is speaking specifically. Your soul has nothing to do with being stopped by the law. When it's talking about your soul, it's talking about being saved. It's talking about being subject to the powers that God put in place to govern the church. This is what Paul's letters were about. It was never about the laws or the authority that was ordained by Caesar or none of that. So let me just put that out there. I apologize for interrupting.